Okay, so this is for the theory of change small group recording. And we're just going to popcorn back and forth and talk about these questions. So the first question is, how do you envision change happening in therapy? I'm going to set a timer. What do you guys, I could cut that little part out to here. So how do you envision change happening in therapy? You guys want to go first?
Yeah, I mean, I can start. I mean, if I'm, thinking of this question in the right way, I would think that change would start just with clients even being open to being in therapy.
Mm-hmm.
And you're not going to do therapy if you're not going to show up. So, um, I mean, and we all have different perspectives and different lived experiences than each other. So I think change is very dependent on the person. And I think, in a general sense, actively participating in therapy and not just being there and like being open to exploring different aspects of yourself that might be uncomfortable would allow for change. So that's my 2 cents on that question.
Yeah, I think that that's absolutely true. And then also just from, one of our lectures that are, I guess, technically Q&A things that we to watch talking about person of the therapist. And it was mentioned in that even just the relationship with the therapist itself can be healing. Um, and so that lecture kind of talked a lot about how breakdown of like childhood relationships or relationships somewhere else in their life are, causing this person a lot of distress. And then just having a positive relationship with the therapist in and of itself can like begin to heal. And I also think too that like building on that, if you just think about anyone in your life, right? Like you're probably more likely to like trust and follow your friend's advice or somebody that you like versus someone that you don't like. And so just thinking about that too, like your relationship with the client is super important in allowing them to buy in and um, you know, take advice or follow a certain treatment plan or something like that.
That's all so true. Especially what we were talking about before we started recording about how stimulating third order change happens when the third therapeutic alliance is positive and strong, like you were just saying. And when I first read this question, my initial thought was to say that change happens slowly, but after hearing you talk, Sophie, I kind of realized that that's kind of just an assumption, and it's true that it can be different for everyone, and especially if you've had therapy already and you feel a little bit more comfortable going in, it might in that case happen faster, for example. Or if you have a little bit more difficulty trusting people, it would happen slower. But just continuing to put an effort from both sides of the therapeutic alliance can create change. And I remember learning last semester about how starting at second order change is the most effective for it to be consistent, because it starts with not just the person, but their system around
They're
them.
like, yeah, they're like their environment kind of
Because if
thing.
it's like, just for example, I was thinking one of my really good friends still lives at home with her parents because she can't move out yet. And she's been going to therapy for so long. And the other day she had said something to me of like, I don't know how much progress I can make while I'm still in this living environment. And it's like you kind of reach like a cap of change that you can make if you're in a certain environment. And also just examining yourself, like you have to make changes outside of yourself also, or at least try to.
Yeah, that is so real.
Mm-hmm. It's
True.
almost like there's like a threshold that you can't get past if you don't get out of the environment that's causing you distress.
Mm-hmm. I think that's very true based on like my background as well. So like in the inpatient clinic, a lot of the veterans were like relapsing when they would leave. Inpatient is like in that environment was so effective for them because they had removed themselves from that environment that was allowing them to do all of these things, right? Like you're in a facility where you don't have access to like alcohol, or like someone's always watching you, so you can't get away with, harming yourself, or like fighting other people, or all of these whatever other, problematic issues were going on. And then they would leave and go back to the same environment, and everything, this wasn't the case for everyone, but it was very common, like if they go back to the same place that they left, they
It comes
usually
back around.
Yeah, that's pretty much how it was at the eating disorder facility that I worked at as well. Like once they left, it was like completely different. Zooming. Okay. So the next question is, what does integration of theory mean, and what would it look like in a theory of change? I feel like we kind of just answered that, but if you guys have anything you want to add to that question.
Yeah, integration of theory is, really not deciding on any one theory to use. So pulling, different parts of different theories, because each theory is kind of based on like one specific idea or concept. And sometimes, that doesn't work for everybody. We're all our own people with our own personalities and our own background. And then you also have to think about that in conjunction with their relationship with the therapist and that dynamic. And so, using all aspects of one theory might not be, create change for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And so being able to integrate ideas from multiple different theories and use that in change too, like when you're creating a treatment plan and you're like, wow, I really don't know what to do with this person. Let's say you're like doing narrative or something, and it's just not working. Being able to have some concept or part of another theory in your back pocket to then apply to the same situation can maybe help get over those speed bumps, or just like applying different theories to different people, in order to account for all of the changes and differences with each patient.
That's like we were
Yeah.
saying too about how it can make it easier to be flexible and help with blocks if like what you're doing isn't working. Instead of trying to like keep pushing at the same wall, you can go through
Forcing
it.
Yeah, like I mean, I think it's like, I mean, like they said, like it's important to have like one like, like home-based theory, but it's also important to know that like there are so many other techniques and other things that you can use to help your clients move forward. So it's nice to have that ability.
I also was thinking last semester, just when we were learning about so many theories, that even the ones that I didn't like as a whole, there was something that I could pull from. Even if I didn't
Yes.
like the full concept, there was little parts of all of them that I liked.
Yeah, that you could like
Cool.
pick and pull and like,
Yeah.
incorporate later.
It's nice that we're not bound to one.
Yeah, it is.
So last question, how does your background in cultural identity influence your theoretical perspective? Something that I was thinking, and you guys can tell me if you agree. I feel like alone being a woman has a huge influence on how therapy works. I feel like women just across the board are and have always been talkers, and communicating is our thing. Like I learned really recently about like the origins of gossip, and that it actually is just a survival tool that women use to communicate and like survive together. And I think, at least for me, I feel like I grew up having really strong female relationships and being comfortable sharing openly, and going into therapy, obviously you need to be comfortable with that. And I think that like having that ability, when I went into therapy the first time, I wasn't nervous, and I feel like I knew how to talk and how to how to navigate it, how to feel comfortable sharing and not feel embarrassed. But I can't imagine going into that if I wasn't given those tools. And I know that so many young boys and men are not given the tools, not because they don't want to, but simply because a lot of the times they're not even given the option.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of the biggest thing that I was thinking about, just being a woman.
Yeah, that's actually a really good like aspect to think about, because we have such different experiences than men do. So I like that you included that.
Mhm.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that also, I mean, sort of kind of similar, like, coming from a military family, like my dad was in the military, my mom's parents, my dad's brothers, my dad's parents, like it's very deeply ingrained, and like I want to work with veterans also, and something that is just like across the board, um, with all of them at least, and my experience there and at the inpatient clinic is, um, the surprise at how much of their continued struggles were really based on their like childhood and less that military service. Obviously, that's still a big
Portion.
like there's tons of stuff that goes on, but there's specifically with like special forces people, uncovering the idea of like why did your brain think that this environment was desirable in the first place? Like where did that come from?
Yeah.
That's so interesting.
Yeah, and just seeing like, you know, all of the healing and stuff that has come from that, from kind of dissecting their childhood trauma, and it's all very like reframing, um based and very like positive forward. I think also too because just something about that environment is a little bit like demeaning, like you're not your own individual, and like you don't get to have,
Mhm.
you
Yeah.
know,
Like a number.
you're in the system, and so it's very like empowering usually. um the treatment approaches, like you are your own person, you know, like you get to be your own person, you get to, you know, do whatever. And so that is definitely something that affects my my theoretical perspective for sure. And I probably wouldn't, I know we role played a little bit with like kind of catastrophizing last semester, and I was like, I would literally never do this
Mhm.
in treatment ever. Like,
Mhm.
so yeah, I would probably be focusing on being very empowering, and also like my role right now, I'm not a therapist, but like trying to create behavior change in a fitness setting.
Mhm.
And it is very empowering because people are just like, you know, they're hard on themselves and they're anxious and they have low self-esteem, and like, um part of my role is just like empowering them to make a change and
Yeah, and
believe.
like offering encouragement.
Yeah, and so that would be like, I've that's just what I'm comfortable with, and that's probably what I would continue to do.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, I mean, and like for somebody like me, like I came from like, I mean, like similar to what you were saying with like the childhood trauma and stuff. Like, um, I grew up with alcoholic parents, and like they also had other substance abuse issues here and there, that weren't apparent until later. And having like other family members like that, like I know I have a lot of like deeply rooted issues. And so, I think that also allows me a different perspective than maybe other people to empathize, I guess, with certain clientele and, you know, things like that. So it's
Right.
interesting path that we're taking.
Yeah.
I feel like everyone that I've talked to in this program has a story of like that would perfectly
Why they're
answer
here.
this question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I grew up in a very male dominated household, and I feel like so much of my femininity I had to like find after I left, and I like left my parents' house. And
Yeah.
I don't think that my brothers were given the same opportunities that I was. And I feel it's so crazy because I have such issues with like most of my friends are women. I deal mostly with women, but I really want to work with male populations, like almost for the opposite reason, because I feel like women need less. Not even women need less, obviously that's not true, but the support is different. And I feel like they need so many men need the opportunity to communicate the way that we were given at such a young age, and they're grown up and have never been able to do that.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm really glad that we got to have this discussion today, and I guess that's about it.
Great.